My name is Jensen. Let's learn some UiPath. This is the UiPath Beginners tutorial, my biggest course ever. It will take you from a complete UiPath beginner, that is, we will start with setup and install UiPath and Orchestrator. Then we will cover the basics and moving on to more advanced topics such as screen and data scraping, email automation, browsers, selectors, and all in between. And don't be scared. I will make a lot of examples and no presentations, as I'm a strong believer in we learn UiPath or all sorts of technical things best if we can try it ourselves. And by that, it's very important that you have your own UiPath instance open, of course, after we install it, and then you do all the robots with me. You can just pause the videos, they are designed for that. Some of you have asked me, what about the coding language in UiPath, and if I can recommend one book about it. I can recommend the Learning Visual Basic.net. That's the best book I ever read about VB.net, which is the coding language in UiPath. I'll link to that in the description below, and I will strongly recommend you reading it if you want to learn more about the coding language. Even if you don't be scared, we can do all things with just these videos. And I would really like your feedback, so please comment these videos a lot with your feedback. Even if you think they're bad, of course I always like good critique, but I also appreciate the ones that are not satisfied with something. That could be the sound, the visual, the presentations, topics that we might miss, and I can add them on the way. So please give me all your feedback in these series. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to get all the new lessons that will be coming up the next month. What are you waiting for? Let's get started. In this lesson, you will learn how to install and set up your UiPath Pro Studio. Let's get started. Go to uipath.com and up here in the right corner, press Try UiPath Free. Now we need to make an account. I just choose sign up with an email, but you can log in with LinkedIn, Microsoft or Google. My organization name, that's just Anders Jensen. My first name's Anders Jensen. I'm in Denmark. Then let's put in my email here, and then the password. Like this. I will confirm to the terms of use, and here we can sign up for UiPath newsletter. Well, I will recommend you doing so because you will get a lot of great news and updates that will keep you updated about the UiPath RPA. So click yes, then click sign up. Now we will have a verification mail waiting for us in our inbox. So I go to my inbox. Here, I will verify it. And a window here will open. That is indeed Orchestrator in a few seconds. First we will download Studio or Studio X, so click here. It will begin downloading. After we have downloaded it, we will click the exe file to install it. UiPath will now open, and in a few seconds we have install and set up our UiPath. That's it. In this lesson, you will learn how to connect UiPath Studio Pro with Orchestrator. First, we go to platform.uipath.com. We log in with our created credentials. I log in with mine here. Press login. Close my password manager here. The first thing you'll see here is that we will have an Orchestrator services here. Click that one here. Mine is with my name. That is my company. You remember we signed up for that. And boom, this is the core of Orchestrator. What we'll first need to do is that we'll go to the menu over here to the left. Then scroll down, all the way down to Management. Click Machines. We will click the plus sign here to create a new machine. and choose the machine template. Call it something. I will just call mine Anders machine. Then we will click provision, like this. Now we will take the users, still in the management here, so click users, and we will find our email address here, the Anders Jensen org, and Anders Jensen, that's my user here, the administration account. We can see that the robot access is disabled, so let's enable that. Click the 3 dots out here, click edit, and then we will click the attended robot. Automatically create an attended robot for this user, and we will choose the Studio Pro. Then we can see that we have a domain and username to fill in, and what we'll need to do here is to go down to our start menu. Then type in CMD for the command prompt, open it, let me drag it down, type in who am I, copy this domain and username, and paste it in here. That's it. Then we will click update. Like this. Now we can see that the robot access is indeed enabled. What we'll do now is to find the UiPath assistant. Search for it in your start menu, UiPath assistant. Click to open it. I will drag mine down here. And as we can see, we are offline. So let's get it online. Click the settings here. Click Orchestrator settings. We'll need to fill in Orchestrator URL and the machine key. The URL will go back to your browser here at Orchestrator. The URL, that's everything from the beginning to HTTPS up all the way up to Anders Jensen default or whatever your company name is. So copy that part, go back to our settings here in the UiPath assistant and paste it in. The machine key, we will go back to the menu here, click the machines. We created a machine, if you remember that, called Anders Machines. We can either edit to get it, or we can simply just click this copy machine key to Clipboard. We'll do so. Go back to the settings, put in the machine key here, click connect, and in a few seconds we are connect and licensed. In this lesson, we will have an overview of UiPath, and more important, maybe to you, is that we will build our first robot. Let's get started. Double click UiPath Studio. And this is how UiPath look when we start up. So let me expand it over the whole screen so we can have a better look at it. The first thing that we will do is that we will go to Tools, because we will install the Chrome extension. Per default, it's Internet Explorer, and that can be quite complicated to work with. That's it. Then we will start up our Chrome, because now Chrome, we have Chrome here. I will expand this as well. And now Chrome will ask us to install a UiPath extension. We'll do that. So click here. New extension added. We will enable the extension. That's it. Now we can automate with UiPath in the browser. Let us close that one again. Then we go to Start. We click New Project, Process over here. That's usually the one that we will use. We can see that we will create a new blank process. So let's give it a name. We could call this our first robot and maybe overview. Call it whatever you want. You can choose the location here and give it a description. However, we will just click Create. The first thing that we will do is to go to Project. Click down here, and here we can see a tree structure of the project. What we will have is the main file. That's where all our activities goes in. That could be click in browsers, type something in, save it to Excel or whatever. That one will be stored here. Then we will have a project JSON. We can double click it actually. And we can see here that there's some information about our project. You don't have to worry about this. Just know that it is here. Close that one down again. Let's go to our main. We can either double click here, or we can open the main workflow by clicking here. This is how a blank canvas looks like. And we can drag activities in here to build a robot. So go to activities, and let's just try to build a robot right now, shouldn't we? So let's build a robot that will open up a browser, do a search, and then close the browser again. The first thing that we will do is that we can search for activities over here in the activities panel, or we could simply just find them down here in the menus. However, we will often just search for them. Of course, in the beginning, you don't know what the activities are named, but we will build a routine in that so you will get comfortable with all the activities. So let's just get started. Find a open browser. So search for open browser, that's here. And you can just click it and then you can drag it in over here. We can see here that we have the open browser activity, that's here, and then we have a sequence. The sequence was created automatically. A sequence is just a linear thing, so sequence will open up the first, do the first activity, then if we have a second activity that will do that, a third, and go on in a linear way. So we can rename the sequence here. What we'll do here is that we can right click, then we can rename, it's outside the pictures, but it's a rename, or we can just double click it here. Then it will also, we can just call this main, because that's our main sequence. Then we will open up a browser. And you can click here, and then you can go to properties over here. That's properties to the given activity. So when this activity is marked, you can get some properties over here. The property that we want to change is the browser type. Remember, we want to automate in Chrome. So click this drop down here and choose Chrome. That's it. Then we must specify a URL here that we will open up. I will open up just Google. So let me open up a browser. That's probably the easiest thing. We will go to Google. Google.com here. And what we'll do here is that we'll just take the address from up here. So copy that one here, go back to UiPath, and here you will insert the URL. You just have to know that all text must be in quotation marks. That's a general rule here in UiPath. So have the quotation mark. You can see when we put in one quotation mark, UiPath will automatically do it twice. So that's fine because we want one in the start and one in the end. Now we built our first robot. That was easy, right? Then we just need to run it. Let me close down this Google sheet and we can run it. To run it, you will go up here to the debug file, click the drop down here and choose run file. Let's do that. UiPath will run in a few seconds, depending on how fast your machine is. And boom, we built our first robot. Let's just open up Google. Now let's do a search on Google. So we will have this open browser, and to do some activities in this browser, we have to drag them inside this do. So we go over here to activities again. Then we click this one here. And now what we'll do is we'll search for a type into. That's a common activity too. You will get used to that. We will drag this type into here. And now we need to indicate element inside browser. So we need to indicate where we want to type in. So just click this one here. And now you can see that we have a yellow field where we want to type in. You can send text to a lot of places here, but we will do it here in the search field. So click here when the yellow rectangle is marked in the search field. That's it. Click here. Now UiPath know that we will type something into here. Another thing, you can see this error sign. That's a sign that we miss something. You'll see that quite often. What we miss here is, of course, we need some text to be typed in. So let's type that in. And again, it must be in quotation marks. So we will do the quotation marks and then we'll just say UiPath. This one will make a UiPath search. Let me close down UiPath again. Oh, sorry, the browser, and then run UiPath. We now run it again. And we should have a UiPath search, but we do miss something. So UiPath here, that's it. However, we missed something to search for. As you can see here, we have only done the search, but we need to have some sort of an enter click. So what we'll do here is that we go back to UiPath and we can click this plus sign here, and then we can send some keys in. There's a lot of key things. The one we are looking for is the enter key. You can see here that some code has been typed into here. You could of course also have typed in this code here. However, it's just more easy to click the plus sign and choose the enter. Now we can do a search. So what we'll do is to close down the browser again and then run it. So click the drop down and the run file. UiPath and enter. We go back to the browser and we can see that we have done the search. So far so good. Let's also, we will not do nothing. We will do nothing with the search, but let's build the robot so that Google Chrome will be closed again. We go back to UiPath. A thing here that we'll do is to put in a message box, because that's some sort of a break. If we just choose close, then I'm not sure we will notice what was going on, so we will choose a message box. A message box, that's nothing but a message to the user that will pop up. We will see that in a second. That's here. We will drag that in. We can now drag it outside the browser, as this is not a browser thing. We could also put it in here. That wouldn't have made a change. So a message box, that is something that will pop up on the screen to the user. Usually we will do that in testing the robots, because we can do some breaks here. The robot will not continue before the user click OK to this message box. So what we can do here is that we can just say quotation marks. You have done a search, click OK to close. Still in quotation marks, like this. So now we will have a break here, and then we can choose to close down Google Chrome after the user have clicked OK in this message box. So go to activities again, and then we search for close application. Drag in this close application. We can indicate the application on the screen. This one could be anything. That could be the calculator, that could be Excel, Spotify, or whatever. We will choose the Google Chrome. So click on this indicate on screen here, and make sure that you have the yellow rectangle across your browser, and then just click here. So now we have built a robot that will do a Google search. Open up Chrome, do a Google search, have a break, and then close down Google again. We will close this one down. Now we run it again. So click the drop down, run file. It will run now. We will do the search in a few seconds. So now we have the UiPath search here. We can see that we have done a search, click OK to close. The robot will not continue before we click OK. So let's do that. And boom, the Chrome was closed. That's it. That's how easy it is to build robots in UiPath. Don't you just enjoy it already? Well, we will get back and build some more fun robots and some robots that you can use in your business. Some key things that we will touch before this lesson is over is that we will have the output field as well. So click down here into the output. This is important, so listen closely. Here you will have some log messages. Here we have only that our robot started and our robot ended, and it took 20 seconds. Remember, we spent some seconds with the message box, but that doesn't matter. Oh, let's click output again. Let's try to send some message to the output. So what we'll do here is that we will click the output again, that will minimize it, and then we will delete the open browser, and we will delete the message box and the close application. Let's just find a write line. A write line do output a message as well as the message box. However, it will send it to the output. So we can drag in the write line, and in quotation marks we can write a message. I can just say you are about to be an expert in UiPath, like this. Then we can run it. So click the drop down, run the file. And there's nothing to see here. However, if we open up the output, you can see here that our message is here. You are about to be an expert in UiPath. This is a window that we will use a lot for testing and logging, so it's important. You will not think that it's important right now, but I will assure you that you will get a little bit cleverer while we start the lessons. But let's just minimize it for now. The last thing that I will talk with you about is the variables here. That's also an important one. So click the variables. Here we can create variables. A variable is simply just a name to store some characters. So let's try to create a variable that will store some characters. The name will be output text. You can call it whatever you want. I just choose to name mine output text. The variable type, we have a lot to choose from. That will be a string. We'll get back to the variable types. Then the scope, that is where our variable is declared, and that's just the main. We only have one sequence here, so we only have one thing to choose from. Then the default value. Let's choose this text from up here. So Control A, copy it, and paste it down into the default value. Because now we have the output text variable here, we can do something clever. As you probably know from programming languages, or if you don't know, it doesn't matter. So delete all the text here, and then we can simply just refer to the output text. That's the name of our variable. You can see that it pops up here. Press the tab, and we will have it up here. So we can run the robot again. And now you will see that we have just used the variable to print out the same message. That's it. That's how easy it is. So now you learned how to build your first robot. Be sure to look into the next lessons where we will dive deep into the things that you have learned here in our first lesson. In this lesson, we will talk about sequence and flowchart. It sounds fancy, but simply put, it's just a part of our workflow, like a locker is of your house. And as with a locker, the functions are to keep your room in order. So first, we'll look at the sequence. Search for a sequence here in the activities, and you'll find it here. So this one, see it as a container. We can drag activities in, and we can even drag subsequences in. We can do this, we can do this, and what a sequence does, it takes the activities inside in order. So it will take the first activity, then it will follow the arrow and take the next one, the next one, the next one. So it's a linear one. And a sequence is great to build simple workflows or to build simple subparts of a workflow. We'll try to create one of them. So what we'll do here is that we'll make this linear process. We will ask the user about some questions, and then we'll present the results in a message box. So do this with me. This is very important. You will learn a lot from variable handling and other things. So drag in an input dialog. We can actually drag in 3. So just do this. An input dialog that asks a question, or you can present some text, and then it will store the user's input in a variable. So the title here, that will just be the first question. And here we will ask the user about his or her first name. So what is your first name? Like this. And then we can store the result in a variable. So Control K, str. And this is the first name, so we can say first name. Like this. The next question, that's the second question. What is your last name? Here. And we will store that in another variable because we'll need those variables to work with. So Control K again, str, last name, like this. So Control K creates the variable, and we can see the variables down here in the variables manager. They are strings in this sequence. Right now the scope is sequence, and if we have more sequence, then this could be a little bit disturbing, so it's always best practice to rename your sequences and actually all the activities to make it more describing. But we can just call this main hair color, whatever, call it whatever you want. So a nice descriptive name. So now we have these two variables. We will ask a third question. So this one will be, what is your hair color? And let me copy it down here. And this one was our third question, so that will be the title. And the result will go in a third variable. So Control K, str, hair, color, like this. We can run it, and right now nothing will happen except the input dialogues. So here we will take on some inputs. I'll just do this, this, this. Nothing will happen because we haven't defined anything. But now let's present the data that we got from the user because we store them in 3 variables. So what we'll do here is just to take a message box. We will scroll down and drag in a message box. So now we want to say the the first name, the last name has this or this here. So what we'll do here is that we'll refer to the value of the first name. We got that from the user up here, so that could be Anders, like my name. Then we'll have a space, quotation marks, and then a space in between. Then we'll say plus, and then we'll have the last name, like this. Then a plus, so always a plus between variables or strings. And then we'll say has, with spaces outside, and then we'll have the hair color, that was the str hair color, like this, plus hair. So now we have presented our data. We can run the file, like this, and here you will say, what is your first name? Well, mine is Anders. What is your last name? That's Jensen. My hair color, well, on a good day it's brown, on a bad day it's gray, but let's be honest, gray. Anders Jensen has gray hair. Of course we could use these variables as we could store them in databases, and this input dialog you will rarely use it, but this one just serves as an example, and you can see that this sequence was linear. So now we have created this. Maybe we should put them in a subsequence because we will do something now. So I will drag in the sequence here, just drag it up here. And then we could press Control, mark all their activities, and then we can simply just drag it in here. So this one is the input dialogs. We can put in the message box as well. And we could rename that sequence as well. So double click it or right click rename. And we can call this first part. Because now, ladies and gentlemen, we will introduce a flowchart. So we can collapse this sequence here so it doesn't mess up our whole canvas, or we can expand it like this. It's still there, nothing changes, just the view. So go over to search activity. A flowchart, that is for more complex decisions. That is complex scenarios with complicated flows between sequences. And this can be nonlinear, we'll see. So search for a flowchart, this one, and drag it in. We can see here that we can double click to view, or we can click the expand here. So this one is a flowchart. And again, since the outer part is a sequence, it will take this one first and then this flowchart. The flowchart will always start here, and then we can drag nodes outside and drag in sequences or activities. So what we could do here is that we could make everything a flowchart. We could drag in this sequence, saying that this sequence should be first here. And what we can do here is that drag it down, and when you see the arrows, just dragging it close, then release. Or that doesn't work. We need to be very accurate, or we can just simply just put in the arrow between. And now what this does is the outside sequence that does nothing except keeping our room in order. Then we will start the flowchart and it will run this sequence. So nothing has really happened before except that we have a flowchart. Well, there was a reason for this, because we can do something here. What we'll do here is that we'll make a flow decision. That's still from the flowchart activities. So we drag in the flow decision here, and we can ask a question. The condition, that is to be a VB condition, and that needs to be entered up here. So click the three dots. So here we can say str hair color, and then we can say if that is gray, then we can do something. So it's pretty much just an equation. It's still like an if statement. It needs to be true or false. So is this true? Yes, no. So it needs to be a statement that could be answered with yes or no, or true or false actually. So like this. Then we can see we have a true out here and a false out here. And as you might have guessed, they both do something. We could both dig on sequences, or we can just have some activities. Let's just have a message box right here. And here you can see we made the arrow, but let's just move it a bit down. And now you can see that we can move these arrows. So what we can do here is that we can move it over here if we want it, and just to keep it a little bit more in order, like this. Or we can simply just, sometimes it's more easy to delete it and, delete it and then drag in a new one here. So this one you will get used to, and you can see here that it looks a little bit more nice. Then we double click here, and that was the true part. So here, then we'll say str first name, plus and quotation mark has gray hair, like this. And now we inside this, we can click up here to get back. So we can go one back, that's the flowchart. So this one was this message box. Now we can do the false. We will just drag it out to another message box here. We can see here, we can drag it in like this. Now we did it smooth. We can double click to view. And again, we'll just say str first name plus hair is not gray, like this. And we should probably have some S's on, but let's just skip the grammar lesson for now. So now we have this flow decision, and we can see that it's not linear. We can have a decision here, and we can actually end the same place. So say that we want a message box more here, and we want to end the workflow here. So we'll just say workflow is done. And again, you can drag in all sorts of activities, go back to flowchart. And of course, when we have the false, we want the workflow to be done as well. So now we have a process here, and we can try to run it. Let's try to have it a gray hair and a non-gray hair. And at first, our initial sequence will run. That is let me type it in, that's Anders. Last name is Jensen. My hair color, well, just be honest in the first instance, and that's gray. Anders Jensen has gray hair. Well, that was correct. Anders has gray hair. Workflow is done. And that was because we did in the first part, we had the message box telling that my hair was gray, thank you. And then we had this message box down here as well. But now let's try to run it again and maybe be a little bit dishonest and say my hair is brown. So here we say Anders. Last name is Jensen. What is your hair color? Well, okay, brown. So now Anders Jensen has brown hair, and then Anders' hair is not gray. That was our false part of the flow decision, and the workflow is done. So that's how you work with sequences and flowchart. In this lesson, we will talk about variables. So open up a UiPath process, and your UiPath will look like this. Go to Activities and then find a sequence. Drag it in, and we will rename it. So either right click on the name or just double click. I will just call this main. Before we talk about variables, let's talk about two output activities because those ones are important. We will search for a write line here in activities, drag it in. A write line is nothing but an activity that will take in text and then it will output it to the output panel down here. So for example, if we type something in quotation marks, as always, we can just say, hey, house tricks. Then we can run the robot. So click the drop down, run file. And now we can go down to output and see that our text is nicely printed out here. Usually we will not use this in the robot, but we will use it as a some sort of a light debugging, so we can check values while we are developing the robot. And this is important, so learn this. That's actually quite simple, isn't it? Then the second output activity, that is the message box. So drag that in. And we can just type something in here in quotation marks as well. Keep learning. What a message box is that it is a box that pops up on the user screens and stops the robot. It will pause the robot until the user clicked OK, and then the robot will continue. Let's see how that looks. So we'll run the file. And now we can see, or at least in some seconds, we can see the message box pops up with the keep learning. The robot is not running until we click OK here. So we can wait. Usually we'll use this for debugging. Say that we want to run our robot to a certain point and then we want to have a break so we can check whatever is going on either in the browser or an application. Then we'll put this in. We can click OK and now the robot will run. So see these two activities as some light debugging tools, that is that we can find errors with them quite easily. We will use them in this variables lesson, so we will use the message box. Let's delete the right line. The first thing that we will talk about is strings. So let's create a string variable. A string variable is nothing but a variable that will hold text of any kind. That could be whatever, letters, numbers, whatever. And this is how it looks. So go to variables, and then we will need to select an activity. So that could be the main here. And then we will create a variable. We will just call this, we could call it maybe welcome. Like this. It will be a string. And we can see in this drop down that we can choose Boolean, integer 32, object, data table, array, and we can browse for some other types. There'll be loads of variables in here. And don't worry, we will rarely use them. I don't know, like 1% of them, or maybe I do, but you will rarely use all of these. So don't worry. We'll use a string here. And we will have a welcome message. So instead of hard coding it up here, typing it in, we will type it in as a variable. So we can say welcome to this course, like this. And instead of having the text just up here, we can just type in the variable's name. And if you want to have the intelligence auto-completion on, press Control Space and you can see a nice drop down. Then we can see the welcome is here, and we can type and we can see that it suggests something. And if we want to complete this, just press the tab and it will complete. So now we have put in the variable here, and this message box will now display whatever value this variable holds, and that is welcome to this course. Let's see it. So we run the file, and we can see that we got our message up here. So we can also combine strings. Let's say that we want to have a second strings. We can call this name. That'll be a string as well. The scope, that is main, that is where it's defined in, and it's here, that's fine. And we can say I'm Anders. And then what we'll do up here is that we can have a plus, and then we can have our second variable. That was the name, right? So we can type it, or we can just press tab and we'll have it here. You'll notice that we'll need a space here, but we will fix that in a few seconds. Let's just try to run this. So now we combine two variables, two string variables. Welcome to this course, I'm Anders. That's quite neat. Then we could add a space. We could actually either have a space in the last part of this or in the first part of this value, or we could type it in up here. So plus, then we can have quotation marks with a space, quotation marks, and then the plus. So now we have added the space in the hard-coded way. We can run the file. Boom, that's it. That's how easy it is to combine strings. We will use that a lot later in the course. Now our second important variable, that's integers. And an integer is just a whole number. That is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is all the whole numbers and not the decimal numbers. It will also be the negative numbers, -1, -2, -3, even though we are rarely using them. Usually we use the integer for calculations, or more important, counting. So let's try to create an integer. So we create an integer down here. We will call this integer 1. And instead of string, as per default, we will choose the int 32, that's an integer. And we can give it a value. And for integers, we don't need the quotation marks, or we should not put them in. So let's just type in a number, and that's it. So now we can go up here again to welcome to this course, I'm Anders. Then we could have another text. We could say I am this ready to teach you UiPath. We could have a colon and a blank, and now we can have our integer, our number. So we'll say plus, and then we can have our integer 1, like here. However, now you notice that if we try to print this out as a text, we cannot print an integer out. We need some sort of a conversion to a string, because we can only print out strings. So we'll say start and then ToString. This ToString we will use a lot. I repeat, we will use this a lot. So remember this. This is important. Now check what this looks like. Welcome to this course, I'm Anders. I am this ready to teach you UiPath 4. Well, 4 on a 10th scale is not a lot, so maybe we should change this. We will create a second integer, so we can call this integer 2. That will also be of the type integer, and let's have it 6. So now we need to add these two. We can go up to the message box. Now this one has become a little bit long. You can see it can be quite hard to look at. So what I can do, we can go up to properties here and we can click it here into the text. That's the same thing, but here you can see that we can drag it out and it's a little bit more neat to look at. It is the exact same as editing down here, but you have the possibility up here. Now we want to add these two integers. And to add two integers, we need them to be integers. So we cannot say integer 1 ToString plus integer 2 ToString. That will not work. We cannot add two strings. But what we can do is that we can have a parentheses here. Then we can say integer 1. Then we can say plus integer 2. Like this. And then a parentheses. And then we can convert it to a string. Here, we click OK. Then we will run the file. And you can see it here. Welcome to this course, I'm Anders. I'm this ready to teach you UiPath 10. Well, that's actually true. And we can stop here. Our last variable we will talk about in depth, that is a Boolean. A Boolean is nothing but a true-false variable. It can only hold either of these values. So let's say that we, let me delete this message box. And we will create a Boolean. So down here, we can say welcome check, call it that. The variable type, that will be Boolean, this one up here. And now we will introduce an if. If you have not stumbled across an if in your experience with computers, don't worry, it's really simple. And for those of you who know programming, you know all about an if. So we drag in an if here. Our condition, well, that will be if this Boolean is either true or false. Per default it is false. So if we don't add a value here, it will be false. That could be the condition, welcome check. So if this one is true, then we will go down here to the then, or if this is false, we'll go to the else. So let's say that it's true, then we want to send the user a welcome message. That will be a message box. So search for a message box here in the activities and drag it in. We can just say welcome here, and that's it. We can run it, and we can see that because the welcome check is false now, nothing will happen. However, if we choose to change this to true, and these ones should not go into quotation marks also, so we'll change this to true. Now this welcome check will be true, and it will go over here in the then. Let's try to run it. Welcome. So that's how this works. We could, so now we have the true here. We could also just say, if we want to specify it out, we could say welcome check equals true. Like this. This one will be the same, so it's a bit redundant, but that's how we do it here. Like this. And of course we could also write in false down here, but it's instead of the blank we could write in false, but there's no point in it as it is false per default. That's how Boolean work. The last variable type that we will use often, that is data tables. However, we will have a lesson dedicated to data tables, but let me just explain what it is. You can find it here as well. A data table. A data table is nothing more than a data table in their memory. That is, it will look like an Excel sheet with rows and columns, and it will just be in the memory. So it will only be there when the robot runs, and when the robot stops, it will disappear. We will use that a lot with Excel and Excel activities. We will come back to that. in this lesson we will learn about control flows. That is, if, switch, and while. So let's go to activities and find an if, and drag it in. Here we can see that we have created an outer sequence, and maybe we should rename that, call it something meaningful like main. Then we have our if activity, and we have a condition here, then we have a then and an else. What this does, it does exactly what you think it does. We have a condition that we can evaluate on. That is always true or false, so we ask a question and then it will be true or false. If it's true, we go down here, otherwise we go down here. We can drop activities in here, so say that the condition is true, then we can have some activities in here. If it's not true, then we can have some activities in here. We don't have to have activities in. So for example, we could only have activities in if it's true over here in the then and nothing here. Then after this if has ran, we will just continue further down the sequence. But let's try a few examples. It's really easy this. First, we can take a case where we take a username and then we will evaluate on that name. Let's see how that is done. So search for an input dialog here and drag it in. We can just call this in the title, in quotation marks, name. Then the label could be enter your name, like this. Then over here in the output, so the user will be asked for his or her name, and then we can take the output as a string here, so Control K, and then we can call it something like str name, like this. We can go down here in variables and see that we have created the variable. So now we have this name and we can ask a question. Let's just ask like something really simple. Then that is if our variable from up here, so that is the str name, remember that holds a value, that holds a name because we asked the user about it, so this will be a name. If that is equal to Anders, then we will do something, otherwise we will not do anything. Let's just find a message box to keep it really simple. We'll find a message box and drag it in. So here we can just say in quotation marks, your name is Anders. Really simple. We can now run it. We will have the input dialog coming up in a few seconds here. I can say my name is Anders, okay, and your name is Anders. And if similarly, if we have typed in anything else, nothing would have happened. The flow will just have ended. We could also have done like this. So this is equal to, and we could also have said like this. This is not equal to. So, and then we can say this, your name is not Anders. We can try to run it again. And now we can say something like Anders, and nothing will happen because we are over here. Now, let's try to get it a little more advanced, however, still really easy. Now I will still evaluate on the name. So let me delete this. But I want to ask what this name starts with. And I can do that with a simple vb.net, that's visualbasic.net. And we can just say starts with. We can see the auto completion will help us. And by the way, if you want to learn this vb.net, that's an essential part of UiPath. You will not need to learn much, just the essentials. And the best book here is the Learning Visualbasic.net. I think I've read it like 8 or 10 times, and it's very easy to digest with tons of examples. There's a link to that in the description below, so just buy it or buy it to Kindle or whatever. And that will help you a lot in your UiPath career. But let's move further on. I'll learn you some vb.net here in this video. So we have a starts with, then we have parentheses, and then we can choose what we want to start it with. We'll just say start it with an A, like here. And then we can say if that is true, then we want to say something to the user. We can just say your name starts with A, like this. Now we can run it, and we could of course also have something over here, but let's just run it here. And let's call my name Anders again. And we can see that your name starts with A. So that's fine. And similarly over here, we could have done something. So that is really easy to understand. And by the way, remember that this is case sensitive. So uppercase A is not the same as a lowercase a when you evaluate. We could also choose to see what it will end with the name. So in that case, we'll just delete this, and then we'll say, can press Control Space to get the auto completion, and then we'll just say ends with, and then we can have an S here. Let's have it a small one like this, and your name, and then we'll just change it down here. Your name ends with S. Now we can run it. Here, again, Anders, your name ends with S. You can try the other one variant here, or try to drop in some activities yourself. Let me introduce you to one more thing, and that is the OR operator. So we can evaluate on more conditions at the same time. So for example, we can say, let me have a space here. So we can say str name, and that one should start with an A. This is just the one that we had before. And then we can have an OR. The name should end with S here. And then we can say your name either starts with A or ends with S, like here. Because now we can run this, and then in the name we can type in, for example, Abraham, and we can see that your name either starts with A or ends with S. Similarly, we can run the file, and then we can put in this, and we can see again, this is true. We are in this bracket over here. So that is quite easy to understand. And similarly, we could have an AND here. An AND is just that both of these conditions must be true before it was either of the conditions. So, and if this is true, then and if this is true, that is, if the name starts with a capital A and ends with an S, then we are over here. So your name starts with A and ends with S. Try that. And we say Anders, like this. So this is quite easy again. Now we have done a lot of string operations here, but let's say that we want to evaluate on integers. That is, if we often want to do like bigger than or smaller than, and we can do this fairly easy as well. So up here in the input dialog, we can just say, call it, let's change this to shoe size. And then in the title, we will have, please input your shoe size. And now we need to store the variable. So before we stored it as a string, and now we need to have it as an integer. We can do two things. The easiest thing is to go down to variables. And then we will say, we can just call this int, change it to size, or we could have created a new one. And then in the variable type, we can change it to int 32, because now some magic will happen. We can see that it automatically has changed over here. Now we need to change the if condition. So say that we want to find out if the user has big feet. Yeah, no. Then we will say the int size, that the shoe size that we put in up here. If that is bigger than 45, like this, then we can tell the user that he or she has bigger feet than 45. So we can say, you got big feet, like this. And then we can run it. And what happens here is that we will evaluate. So let's just say it's 46. You got big feet. And otherwise nothing will happen. So that's fine. We could also have this bigger than or equal to. So remember, the bigger than or smaller than should be first, and then the equal sign will be less. So this one will work exactly like the one before. I will suggest you try the other part of the if. So here we will have a 45, and then we'll click OK. You get big feet. So that's quite easy to understand. And we could of course also have done it with smaller than, and then we could ask if the user has small feet if we wanted to use that as an example. So all this is fairly easy to understand, I think. Let me know in the comments if we should elaborate on the if. Now we will switch to an advanced if, and that's actually a switch. So, and I think actually I will let this be, and then I will just disable the two activities here. So I'll disable this, and I will disable this. because we will use it later on. So now, and what this does, it just tells UiPath, the UiPath engine, to ignore everything in here. So now we will introduce a switch. Here, we will drag the switch in, and then the switch is actually working in the same way as the if. So what happens here is that we can have an input dialog, and then we can ask a question down here. And let me actually just enable this first input dialog, because then we can reuse this. So here we could just call this, and we can use the name again. And it's by purpose that this will change a lot, and we will change the variables and all that a lot, because then you'll get used to work with the variables in this course. And here we will ask, what is your name? Question mark. So here we ask, and then we need to change the variable again. And we go down to Variables Manager. And we can call this str name again and change the variable type. So it's fairly easy to work with variables as well, as we have learned in the previous lesson. So now we have gotten the user name here, and then we can ask an expression here. So what do we want to ask? Well, we want to just ask what is the str name, and then we will not do anything else, because then we will add some cases down here. And what we can do here is up in the type argument, we need to change this to a string, because it's strings we are working with. If it was integers or booleans, we will have to do that. So here, change it to a string. Then we will add cases. And what we can do here is in the default value, then we could add in an activity, and then we could add cases further down. Let's try to add a new case. For example, if the user enters Anders, that is the case. So if the value of the str name is Anders, then we will drag in an activity here. And what we'll drag in is the message box. And we can say here, we will just say, you are probably the author of this tutorial, like this. And then we could add in another case just for the fun of it, that is Usain. And again, we will drag in an activity here. And we can just say something like, God legs, like this. And then we will add a default case, that is if the name is none of these, then it is always best practice to have a default case. And here we can just say, have a good day, like this. Now let's try to run the workflow, and we can try with three names first. Anders, we'll see that you are probably the author of this tutorial, right? We'll run it again. Oh, I ran it in debug, nothing will really change. And here, what is your name? That is Usain, and we can see got legs here, so that's good. Then we could try to enter a third name, like something like maybe Donald, and here, have a good day. So that's how you use a switch, again, really easy. Now, the last thing that we'll talk about in this tutorial is the while. That is a loop, as you might know it from somewhere else. And if you don't know it, well, that's fine as well. So what I'll do here is that I'll delete the switch, and now we will enable this flow up here. So I will enable activity here, the shoe size here. And now we will run into a name because we changed the variable, so we will change it back. And this is good practice, so I will advise you to do all these operations with me. So I'll call this int size and change it back to an integer, like this. So now here, we will create a while loop. So, and we will make this loop run like a certain number of times. And we can do that by using a while. And again, this is fairly easy to understand as well, so drag in a while. So this loop will run, and maybe we can, in the condition, we can say, we will have to use a condition. And the condition will be like, if the int size is smaller than, maybe say 40, that's small feet, then it will run. So it will run until the user enters a foot size of bigger than 40. And again, here in the input dialog, we'll just change it to size. And what is your shoe size here? Because now, this is quite smart. What is your shoe size? Here, like this. So this one will come first. So we will ask that in the beginning of the while loop, and then we will have the condition. So as long as the user types in a small number, then this loop will run forever. Let's try that. Here we will run it. And now we can say 35, you got big feet. Well, that was not right. Then we can say 36, you got big feet. And now we can see, let's type in 50 and check what we have done wrong here. Because you will make a lot of, when you do make a lot of RPA workflows, you will do some errors and we can just fix them on the fly. And here we can see that we have change the equal sign over. That is, if the equal sign should be bigger than 45, and then we can run it. So we can now run it, and then it will work. And this is really useful for you to see how we can fix errors on the fly. So 35, nothing will happen. 36, nothing will happen. 23, nothing will happen. 47, you got big feet, and the workflow will end. However, there's one thing I need to teach you, because this is important. You saw here that we could practically have created an infinite running loop, and that is not really good practice. So what we'll do here is that we'll create an index variable. So we will mark the outer sequence here, then we'll go down to variables, and we can create an index variable called int index, like this. And it will be of the variable type int32. Remember, an integer, that is whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And this will just basically be a counter. So every time we have run one loop in the while loop, it will add 1 to this int index. So what we can do here is that we can say, we'll add it in a few seconds, but we can say the other condition, that is if the int index is smaller than, let's just say 5, then we will run this. Because what this does, now you see something smart, then in the end of the while loop, that is here in the body, then we can have an assign. So find an assign here and drag it in. And now we need to add 1 to the int index, because here we have ran it one time. So int index, and then we'll say int index plus 1. This one will just add 1 to the int index. And this is, as I told you, best practice, because otherwise we have created a loop that might run forever and it could bring down the whole system. So let's try this. And we can see here that we run the flow. Let's just try to put in small feet. So that is 23, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5. And remember, it will end, the int index will start at 0. So, and because it's smaller than 5, then it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 times. And then it will end because of our condition here. So this is the best practice in your while loops. So that's it. In this lesson, you learned all about control flows, if, switch, and while. In this lesson, we will talk about Excel and data tables. This is an important topic, so listen closely. We have an Excel sheet here. It's called Docs. We got 4 columns: ID, name, age, and senior. The ID, that's just a unique number, 1, 2, 3, up to 10. Then we got a name of the doc. We got the doc's age. And then we got a blank column of senior. We want to work with this. So the first thing that we will do is that we will close down the Excel sheet. I put it on the desktop, by the way. Then we want to read it into UiPath. So find an Excel application scope, drag it in. We want to get the workbook path. We could either just browse here, or the most correct way will be to minimize UiPath, find your Excel sheet, shift right click, copy as path. Then we go back to UiPath. Now we can either put it in here, but the best practice is to create a variable. So let us create a variable. We will call this Excel book. And then you simply just, in the default, that is the value, you'll paste in the path here. And it's a string. So now we can just put in the variable up here, Excel book. So this one will work with this Excel book. The reason for having the variable up here instead of just the hard-coded address is that if we update the address, we can just update it here. For example, if we use this book on several occasions in our workflow. So let's stick to this best practice. We can untick the visible because we don't want to see what's going on in the Excel sheet. That is good if we want to test something, but we don't. So we'll untick the visible. Then we want to read the Excel sheet into a data table. And let us talk about data tables. Data table is nothing but an Excel sheet, but that data table only exists in the memory. So it will be rows and columns, and it will only exist when the robot runs. It is smart because we can manipulate it. So the strategy is that we want to read the Excel sheet into a data table, then we want to manipulate the data, and then we write the content of the data table back to Excel. That's the strategy. So let's read it. We find a read range here in the Excel activities. Make sure that is the one in the Excel, because there are two. Drag in the read range. This one will read a sheet. This is sheet 1. And be sure to verify that your sheet is named sheet 1, because otherwise it wouldn't work. We can see that indeed is the case here. Then the range here, we want to read the entire range. You can either have quotation marks as here, or you can simply just delete it. This one will read the entire sheet. Then we want to output it to a data table, as I told you. So go over here, press Control K, and we can call this docs. Sorry, that was doc. Let us correct it. So go down to variables. You can see it here, and we will correct that to docs. Like this, and this is a data table. That's fine. So it will read the Excel sheet into this data table. Now we are ready to work with the data. And what we'll do here is that we'll work with the data table. So we find a for each row. Here. We drag it in underneath. Here. So for each row, that's fine. That's each of the row in the data tables. And we want to use the data table that we just created. That is docs. So just type docs in here. That's fine. What do we want to do? Well, let's create some simple examples. The first one is that we want to find out what the corresponding name to the ID 8 is, and we can do that quite simply. So let's find an if, search for if here, drag it in. We will ask a question now, because here in an if we will ask a question, and then it can either be true, it will go to then, or it can be false, it will go to else. We will ask. So if the row, that is the current row that we are working in, then we want to get the whatever in the idea. So say we are here, then the idea, that is 2, so that is the ID column. And the column here in the vb.net, that is item, then parentheses, quotation marks, idea. And because it's from Excel, it's an object, we need to convert it to a string. I know it can sound a little bit counterintuitive, but that's just how it is. So let's do this. So if the row item idea, that is equal to 8, for example, in quotation marks, then we want to do something. Then we want to pop up a message to the user. So let's find a message box here, drag it in, and we can let's make a message here. Then we can work our way into the getting the data out. So we'll just make a text at first. So quotation mark, the dog got idea, then space, and then we can put in the value of the current row and the ID column. So we'll do this, plus row item in parentheses idea to string. So this one will just put out whatever ID it is, and of course we know it's 8, but that could change. And we can also put in the name and the age. So we'll do this, plus, then we can say got the name, plus, and then we will simply just do as we did before, row item, and this time it is age, so age to string. That will print out the corresponding age. And we can have the name as well. Oh, sorry, that one was name, so we will have the name here. And we will have the age, so plus and the H like this, then a space, maybe a space in front, and we can just print out the H. So row item H to string like this. It was a long one, but it's good to get used to these row item, understand what's going on here, because that is important. So we can run the file. Remember to close down the Excel sheet here, and we can run the file. We should get the name of the ID 8 and the corresponding H in a few seconds. So now we run it, and we can see here the doc got ID 8, got a name Tankable, and the H 5. Well, we forgot a space here, but that's just grammar. So that's how easy it is to work with data. And now we could also say that we wanted both the idea 8 and maybe the idea 10. Then we can just say OR here, and we will just copy this, because so it's, if the idea is either 8 or 10, then we want to print out the name like this. We will run it again. Here, the doc got ID 8, got the name Tankable and the H 5. Then we should have another doc when we click OK. And we can see we got that here. 10 got the name Vera, Fang, and the H 5. So far so good. So that was working with strings from Excel. Now we want to read the H and assign a value to the senior column, and then update the Excel sheet with their value. So what we'll do here is that we will delete this if, and we can drag in another if. So find an if and drag it in. Now we want to ask, we want to look at the row item H, that is the current row and the H column. So we'll say row item H. What we'll do here is that this is the row item H, and usually we will, before we converted it to a string, but now we need it as an integer because we want to look as it as a whole number. We want to ask, is it bigger than or equal to 6? So what we'll do here is that we will, in front of this, we will say convert, and now you can see nothing happened, but if you press Control space, let me do this. So we can press Control space here, so we can say convert. We can see that it helps us. So here, then dot, and then we will convert it to what? We will convert it to an int 32, like this. Then we will have a parentheses. Be sure to delete the space. So we will convert this row item H to an integer. So another parentheses, and this is converted to an integer. Now we just need to ask, what H's do we want to look at? We want to look at if the H is bigger than or equal to 6, then we want to do something. That's here. And first we can just print out the names of the old docs, and then we can update the Excel sheet. So drag in a message box. And then we can simply just put in row item, and then we will say the name, because we will have the H here. So we'll have the corresponding name, we'll print that out and tell the user that this is an old doc. You can just say is a senior. So now we get all the senior docs printed out. We can run it. Bilbo Baggins is a senior, Queen Elizabeth is a senior, Barack Obama is a senior, Dostoevsky is a senior. That's it. Now let's update the Excel sheet. So what we do here is that we'll, instead of a message box, we simply just drag in and assign here. What do we want to assign to? We want to assign to the row, that's the current row again, and then the senior column, that's the item of senior. What do we want to say? Well, we can just say old doc, right? Like this. And remember, this assign is only updating the data table. And we want to update the Excel sheet. So outside the for each row, then we can, now we have the data table updated with the old docs, then we want to update the corresponding Excel sheet. So what we do here is that we will find a write range. That one will write the content of a data table to an Excel sheet. So drag it in here. Make sure it's outside the for each row, but still in this do here. We want to write, just overwrite to the sheet 1. Here, that's the range. Usually I just delete this range because it will just be always A1. And up here, I will add the headers. We need the headers. And then we just need the data table. And remember, we can either press Control Space, or we can remember that our data table is called docs, like this. So this one will loop through all the rows in the docs. It will look at if the age is bigger than or equal to 6, then it will assign an old doc in the senior column to the data table, and finally we print it out back to Excel. Let's see that in action. Like this. We can open up the Excel sheet now, and we will see that the senior column has gotten updated by our robot. Here you can see that we got the 4 old docs. That is because their age is bigger than or equal to 6. That was the introduction to Excel and data tables. We will have some use cases where we can repeat our knowledge. In this lesson, we will talk about applications and selectors. To do desktop automation, we need to understand one important topic, and that is this selectors. So a selector is simply just a container for storing all the attributes or graphical user interface elements and its parents as XML fragments. Well, that was a bit of a technical description. We'll see how it's working in simplicity. So for example, we have a calculator here. And we can do a click activity. So let's find a click. It will just click a button. So we'll drag this one in. And then we'll indicate where we want to click. Say that we just want to click the 9. Then we'll do this. To find the selector for this graphical element, that is the number 9 button in this application, we can click the 3 ribbons here and click Edit the Selector. And this is the selector. This is the one that we use. We can have a more complex one. If we open up in UI Explorer, we can add elements to it, but we won't do it here. Here we can see that we have some applications ID up here, the title, and then we have that then it is number 9 button. This one will of course change, and this one as well, when we want to click the number 8 button. And as it is with these selectors, some of our applications or browsers, they have changing layouts. So these selectors, they will change as well as the attribute nodes. And some of them are generally unstable or volatile. And that's why we need, as RPA developers, we need to fine tune them. And we'll see how we can do this in this example. So let's stick with the calculator. And this one, of course, we can click OK here. Then we can run the flow, and we'll see that we actually click number 9. So we will run the flow. Now we click number 9. So now we can click number 9. However, say that we want to take user input, and then we want to click that input from the user. We will take 2 user inputs. We will do an addition, and then we'll present the value we get from calculated in the calculator, not in the actual UiPath engine. And this is because the calculator is a great simplification of applications. So this one will look exactly like the applications that we work in and that we need to automate. This button here is the same button as it is in another application, ERP system, CRM, or whatever you want to automate. And this one is great for simplicity, and every one of you has this calculator. So open up your calculator, open up UiPath, and we'll create a flow together that will make you understand selectors and how we can create dynamic selectors, which is probably one of the most important topics of UiPath. So first, let's go up here. First, let's just reset every time we started. Let's reset the calculator. And we'll do this with a click. Again, we will drag this click in. No, we will click C here. That one will reset it. And first of all, we could take some input from the user. Let's just take one input. So what we'll do is that we'll find an input dialog here, and we will drag it in. So the title, that could be number A. The label in quotation marks, that could be put in your first number. That's the first number of the user's summarization. And because the selector, it is a number in the selector, you can see that, but it's a string. So we will take the input as a string. If we wanted to calculate it here, if we wanted to calculate it in the UiPath engine, then we would have taken it in as an integer, because the UiPath engine will need integers. But the selector, that is just text, strings, so we will use text. So here in the output, press Ctrl K, and then we'll say str number A, like this. And then what we can do here, because we want it here in the click button, we want this to be dynamic. And of course we could create a switch with all 10 numbers from 0 to 9, but that would just be overkill when we can do something smarter. This is an important concept, so listen closely. And if you don't understand it, just repeat it a couple of times, because you need to understand this. So click Edit the Selector. And what we want to do here is to make it dynamic, and then we can take it as an input. And sometimes it's just trial and error. And usually we could probably delete this here and this one. And what we do here is that we'll make this number 9 button dynamic, and this might work. We'll see. So here in number 9, we will mark the 9. Then we'll right click, and then we'll choose variable. We could also create a variable, but we just created one that was the int variable, the integer from up here. So choose variable, and then we'll simply just mark this, and we'll click OK. So now you can see that we have our string variable number A put in here. So whatever the user types in, that number will go here, and hopefully, sorry, this dynamic button will work. Let's try it. So we run it. Let's pick number, 3 first. So we put in 3 here, and hopefully we will do the calculation. We'll reset it, and that was number 3. Let's try it one more time. So we run it. Let's just pick number 0 maybe. 0. Like this. So now we have created a dynamic selector, and that was fairly easy. And because we did that, we could change where we wanted to hit with this click quite easily, right? So now we can do the calculation very easy, and we will repeat the steps so you will get used to it. So after having typed in the first number, then we will have a plus. We'll click the plus here, drag that in. We will indicate where we want to click, that is the plus, like this. So now we click plus. Then we want the second number, so we need the input dialog from the user as well. So find the input dialog and drag it in. The title, that will just be number B, and then we will put in our second number. We'll say that to the user, put in your second number, like this. We need to store the input into a variable, so Ctrl K, and again we'll say str number B. And we can go down here in variables and see that we have created the 2 strings. So far so good. So now we click plus, then we need to click the second number. We could actually cheat a bit, or we could create from scratch. If we wanted to cheat, and you often want to do this because that's why we're in the RPA business, right? We want to automate things, then we can just copy it here, this activity, and paste it in below. And then we can click the 3 ribbons, we can edit the selector, and what we just can do is that we could just change this, big B, from A to B. This will work. So, and if you have, you couldn't remember how to do this, then just rewind a bit and see how we did it in the first place. So we click OK here. So now we did the addition. We can try it. Usually when you make these workflows, it's often nice to just run your workflow several times so you can see that you haven't messed up. So let's just pick 2 plus 8. We'll click OK, and hopefully we'll do the calculation. 2 plus 8. So now we need to click the equal sign because we need to get the result. So what we do here is that we will find another click and we'll drag it in. We will click the equal sign here, like this. And if we do this in the calculator, then we'll end up here. So if we want to do the easier thing to get the result, because we want to present that to the user, then we will just send a hotkey here, Ctrl A, that will mark everything, then we'll copy it and paste it in the message box. So let's see how that is done, because then we'll get used to the send hotkeys as well. So we'll find 2 send hotkeys. Send hotkey, we will just drag 2 in while we're at it. The first one, that will press Ctrl A, and we need to indicate where we want to press Ctrl A. So click the indicator on screen, and we want to do it here, right? And now we need some selector work as well. So click the 3 ribbons, click edit the selector. Because as you see here, this one will only work when the display is 10, but we can have a lot of different results from 0 to 20 to 18. So we want to change this to make it dynamic. And what we do here is that we'll delete this 10 and then replace it with an asterisk. Because this selector will work as well, because now it will just work for any display is. We can validate it, click up here, and we can see that it indeed works. So now we send the hotkeys, we Control 8 marks everything, then we will Control C, that will copy it. We will indicate the field again here. We'll click the 3 ribbons, click edit the selector, and again replace this with an asterisk. We can click validate and see that we have created a working selector. Then we want to have the results from the clipboard, and what we can do here is that we'll say get from clipboard. So this one will get the text, copy it from here, and then we can get the clipboard text. So get from clipboard here, drag it in. So the clipboard, well, that's already in it here from up here, and then we'll store it into a string. So we'll say Control K over here, str, result. And now what we want to do is just to present the result. So find a message box, scroll a little bit down and drag it in. Here we'll say str, result, like this. So now we have created the workflow that will take 2 numbers from the user and do the calculations. Let's try to run it. The first number, that's 5. The second number, let's pick 1. So we click delete 5 plus 1 equals, and then the message box will come up giving us the result. So mission accomplished. In this lesson, we will learn about browsers in UiPath. Our mission in this lesson is to go to this login page. This is just a sample login page. You can search for it on Google, the internet login, and then you'll come to this. So it's a Selenium sample page. We'll use this username and this password, and then we'll click login. Then we'll take the data that we find in here, do a Google search, and present the data for the user. So fairly easy. The first thing we'll need to do in UiPath is to go to Home, then we'll click Tools, and then we need to install the Chrome extension. If you want to automate in Firefox or Edge, another browser than Internet Explorer, then you need to install those extensions. When you have installed it like this, then if it's your first time, there will be a pop-up in this browser asking you if you want to install the UiPath extension here in the browser as well. Just click yes to that. So we can go back here. The first thing that we will do is to open up a browser. So search for open browser here and drag it in. We will mark the open browser here, and then on the browser type, choose Chrome. Then we'll go back to Chrome. We will find our login page. We will copy the address here and go back to UiPath. Now we will create a variable. We will call it strURL. It will be a string, and in the default value, put in quotation marks and then paste in the value like this. Because now we can just put in the strURL here, and that variable that holds the value that we just defined. So this will just open up a browser. We can try it. So let's close this one. We can run it. And what you'll see is that it will just open up the internet login when UiPath run here. That's it. We can verify it that we're here. So fairly easy. Then we need to find the username and the password, and the username we have here. So copy this one, and again we create variables for it. So create 2 variables. The first one is struser. Go to default, and in quotation marks, paste in the login. Then we can create the password, strpass, quotation marks, and then we'll find our password here. That's super secret password, like this, and paste it in here in quotation marks, like this. Because now we can type in the username and password, and what we'll do here is that we'll find the type into. This one will type anything in. This could be a browser or an application. Ours is a browser. So click here, indicate element inside browser, and choose the username field. You can see that it becomes yellow. We can type in wherever we want, but we want to type in here in the username. In here, what do we want to type in? Well, we just want to type in the str user that holds our value for the username. Similarly, we will do for the password. So drag this guy in, indicate the password field like this, and then we'll say strpass like this. We can try to close down our browser and we can run the sequence again. UiPath will run in a few seconds. We will now type in the username and the password, and it's fairly easy. UiPath is really intuitive, so this one will become almost a routine after you did it the first time. Then we just need to click the login button, and for that we will find a click activity like this and drag it in. We will indicate where we want to click, and we want to click the login like this. Again, we will close it and we will run it. UiPath will run, and now it will log us in. So it will click the login button, and we are logged in if we go to the browser. Let me close down. This one is just my password manager. So what we need to do here is that we want to scrape this welcome to the secure area. When you are done, click login, log out below. So that's fine. We will use a get text, that is screen scraping. So get text, drag it in here. And now we need to indicate what we want to scrape. So click here and we can find a text here. So this guy here, the get text, this one produces a string variable. It will go over here in the output, and that string variable we can work with afterwards. So go over here in the output, press Ctrl K, and we can call this str login text or whatever we want. I know this text is nothing of importance, it's just an example. So now we got this. We can work with this as we want it. We can, for example, just write it out in the first place. So we drag in a right line, and then we will refer to our login text, the string here, like this. Let's try to run the workflow now and verify that we indeed have created the flow that we wanted so far. So we log into the web page here in Google Chrome. Then we scrape the data, and we go to the output panel to verify that we indeed had scraped the right data. So go to output, and we can see here that we have the welcome to the secure area, blah, blah, blah. So far, so good. We can now delete the right line, because what we wanted to do was to go to Google and type in a search. And what we do here is just simply navigate to, drag it in, and here we can just hard code in the variable. We could of course also create a variable if this one changes, but Google is Google, hey. So what we want to do here is that we'll just say Google. Let me get the address here. And in quotation marks, paste it in. That's the Google address. So this one will navigate our browser to Google. We're here, and then we want to type in the search. And what we'll do here is that we'll find a type into, drag this guy in underneath, then we'll indicate the search element. So click indicate. That will be here. What search do we want to type into Google? Well, it was just this data that we got from up here. It didn't make a lot of sense, but it serves as a great example, as I said. So now we'll type it in. We need to either click the search button, or more easily, we could just have an enter click, because when we do a Google search and hit enter, it will search for that specific text or string. So click plus here, and then find the enter button. So now our workflow is totally finished. We can close down Google, and we can run it. So the workflow will now run. We will take the username, the password, the login. We will scrape the text, and we will do a Google search on our string. We can go down to Google, and we can see that we indeed had made a search. The important lessons here is to make sure you enable the Chrome extension and choose the Chrome browser type over here. Then we will create variables for the parts that can change or that we can reuse. And then it's pretty much straightforward. It's type into, click, get text, present the data, navigate to. So UiPath is very intuitive. In this lesson, we will talk about emails. We can automate all sorts of email clients. That is Outlook, Exchange, Gmail, or any other email client a human can operate. In this example, we will use Outlook as that is the most common. However, they are pretty similar, so if you can do this, you can do all of them. We will choose an automatic activity, that is a UiPath activity. Instead of, we could also create a robot that will click, click, click through each of the emails and then save the data for each one of them. However, that will not be a very fast solution, neither will it be a very stable solution. So let's not do that. We go to UiPath, and first we drag in a sequence. This one will be our main sequence, so we'll call it main. Then we can find a get Outlook mail messages here. And this is an activity, you can see it's quite flat, there's nothing really in it here. But in the properties, we got all the information typed in as we wanted. The account, that is just this account here in Outlook. RPA test at @clo_dk, that's the email account you want to automate. So you put in the account here either in quotation marks and type it in, or more correctly, create a variable. Of course, we'll do that. So we'll press Ctrl K. We can call this str account. Then we go down to variables down here and type in a value for that. And that is, of course, the RPA test at @clo_dk, like this. That is the account. The inbox, that is the mail folder that we want to get the mails from. And here we will get it from the inbox, because we will get some data out from these emails. Then we have a filter. That's quite advanced, so we will skip that to the intermediate or advanced course. We can choose to, after we read the emails, we can choose to mark them as read. However, all ours are unread, but we could have chosen to do this, and then it will all be read when we got them here. We can choose to only read unread messages. However, let's just pick all of them. And the top number here, that is how many emails we want to drag in. We will just take 30, even though we only got 5. That's okay, we will only automate our 5 emails. Then the output, that's where all our mail messages get saved, so we can get the data out and either present the data in an application, in an Excel sheet, or whatever we can find out. But here we will create a variable. So press Ctrl K, and then we can call this, that is a list of mails, and you'll see why in a few seconds. So we created a list of mails, and if you go down to variables, you can see that this is a list of mail messages. That is a variable type that we haven't touched yet. However, it's quite simple to understand. Just imagine a list with bullets on, and each of the bullets that contains the mail message. So all the information about the mail messages is in that bullet. And what we'll do here to iterate through all these bullets is to find a for each. So take the for each, not the for each row, drag it in. The for each item, we can choose to change this. It doesn't matter what you call it. I will call it mail, as that is more descriptive, but you can just keep item if you want. Then we want to look in our newly created list. So start typing list of mails, and then the tab to autocomplete the rest of it. Then we should specify what format this variable that we have in our bullets is that in, and that was a mail message. You can see that here, that was a list of mail message. So what we'll do is that we'll go to the type argument, and then we will browse for types. If we can't find it here in the drop down, we can, but let me just show you. So we will search for mail message like this, and take the one under system.net.mail. Click OK, and now we're set. So now we are iterating through each of the bullets, the mails, however nothing will happen. Let's just try to write out the subject and the date. Let's start with the subject, so we find the right line, because we will just write it out to our console to begin with. So what we'll do here is that we will refer to each of the mails. So that is mail. Then we will say a dot. And now we can see that we can actually type write out the body, the CC, the from, the subject, and all that. And we wanted the subject, so we'll just do this. Now this one will write out the subjects of the 5 emails. So let's try to run it. UiPath will run in a few seconds, and we will have our subjects nicely put out in our output window. Like here. You can see it here, 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 and here. That's good. Now we want to write out the date as well. So drag in another write line. And then what you do here is that we'll still refer to the mail. However, you won't find the date in this drop down. And what we'll have to do here is to refer to the headers. And then we'll say date. So this one will write out the date. And this is vb.net again. And I'll recommend this book. I recommended it before. That is learningvisualbasics.net. I will refer to it in the description of this video. So now we also have our date nicely written out. Let me run it, and we can see that we have our data here. So we have the mail and then the date. Let's try to type it in an app. It could be all sorts of apps that we wanted to type this into, but let's just choose a simple one, and that is Notepad. It's not very advanced, but it's a fine simulation for a more advanced app. So we will find a type into and drag it in. We will indicate the app. So click indicate and then click indicate where in the app we want to type in. That's of course the text area here. And then we can type something in. However, something will happen as we need to address, because when we start to type in the first subject, for example, then this title will change, and so will the selector. So we'll need to take that into account, but we'll do that. We'll click the 3 ribbons here. Then we'll click edit the selector, and up here in title, we will need to, we can just take all sorts if we put in asterisk. That means that we will take all titles. We can validate it and it will still work. So now we just click OK. And then we can start to type in. What do we want to type in? Let's just type in the subject. So that is again mail subject, like this. And then have an enter. So we will change a line every time we put in a subject. Let's try to run this flow and verify that we indeed can run this as well. So that is the first subject, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. Sorry. That's it. And now let's try to take it a step further and automate it to Excel. We want to save both the subject and headers in the date in Excel. What we want to do here is that we want to create, our strategy here is to create a data table. You know, that is a clone of an Excel sheet just in the memory. So we want to create that with 2 columns in subject and date. Then we want to, for each iteration that we do here, then we want to type it in that data table, and finally we'll write it out to Excel. That's how you go around it. So find a build data table, drag it in. We can choose the output. So go over here and create a new variable, Control K, and just say dt output. Then click the data table here and delete everything that's in it. Just click the cross here. I don't know why they keep having these examples. You will never use it. So we can have the date first and then the subject. That is both of the data type string. So date, subject. Always use strings unless you have a good reason not to. That is, if you want to do some calculations or something. Even if we have numbers, just use strings. That is a very good advice from me to you. You will see why when you advance to the next courses. However, now we have data table. Then we can start to, when we have this data from each of the mails, then we can start to write something into that data table. So what we do here is that we will delete this type into. We will delete these 2 write lines in a few moments. So we will find a add data row here, and add data row will add a row into a data table. So we will specify what data table we'll want to add the data into. That is just the dt output, that one that we just created. And up here in the array row, there we want to specify what we want to add in. So click the 3 dots here. Then have the curly brackets. And the first thing that we want to add in, that was the date. So mail, headers, parentheses, and date, like this. And then we want the next column, so just separate it with commas, like this. And we can just type in mail subject, like this. This one will add in a row with the date and the subject for each one of the mails. So we'll do that, and we can delete these 2 write lines. So what we need to do now is just to write it out to Excel. So when this for each is done, we can collapse it here, then we want to write it out to Excel. So what we'll do here is that we will find an Excel application scope here and drag it in. I created a empty new Microsoft Excel worksheet, so I closed that one and I placed it on my desktop here. So shift right click wherever your Excel sheet is and then copy as path. Go back to UiPath and we'll choose to create a variable here for the workbook path. So down in variables, str Excel path. Then it's a string, that's fine, and just Control V, paste in the address, like this. So now we can put in the address up here. That one will say that the scope, that is this Excel sheet. We will choose to untick visible. We don't want the Excel sheet visible. That's fine. Then we need a write range, to write out the data table. So drag in the write range. Where do we want to write out to? Sheet 1, that's fine. Delete the range, we'll always do that. Add headers, and then we'll say DT output. Over here, that's what we want to write out, the data table we want to write out to Excel. So let's run it and verify that we indeed can automate and save our data to Excel as well. We will run UiPath, and in a few seconds, or 5 maybe, then the workflow will be done here. We will open up our Excel sheet and verify that we have saved the data in the right columns and rows. And here we can see it. Let me just expand this. You can see that we have a nice date column and a nice subject column. That's it. That's how you work with the data from the emails. Now we can try to send emails as well. That's very easy. So let me I think I'll just delete this and create a new sequence. That's the easiest thing. So we drag in a new sequence and we'll call that main as well, like this. So to send a Outlook mail message, we can just search for Outlook, and we can see here that there's 4 Outlook activities. Get Outlook mail messages, that was the one we just did. Move Outlook mail messages, you will rarely use that. And reply, you will probably use it a bit more, but not that often. And then we have the send, you will use that a lot. So drag in the send, and here we can send an email. It's pretty very obvious. You just put in a to, a subject, and a body, and boom, send it. So what we'll do here, and of course we can do a lot of other things, but let's keep it this simple way. So I'll just send an email in quotation marks, just RPA test, clonus DK, oh, that was not rightly spelled. The subject, that will just be hey, in quotation marks, hey, don't forget to have a good day. Here, and the body, let's just say kind regards, Anders. We could attach files, so if we have files in our workflow, we'll often choose to attach it, however, let's not. The account, we can specify that, and if we have just deleted our variables, so we will just create the variable again. That might be stupid, so str account, we will just create RPA test, then clonus. And you will notice that we could have used it here, but we couldn't be sure that the account was the same as the to. So let's just keep it as the account here. That was the account we want to send from. So here in the input, that is the str account, like this. Now we can try to run the file, and we will send an email to Outlook. And here we can see what we did wrong. We can see that we misspelled the account. UiPath is very good to have these arrows on, and you'll get an expert in solving them. So what we do here is that the account was wrong. Then we can go down to variables. And yes, I misspelled it. So we do this. I like these arrows, as I said, because they show you how you work as an RPA developer. I'll do a lot of these arrows every day, so don't get frustrated when you make yours. Let's try to run it again. And this time we should be able to send an email. So we can go to Outlook, and then we can see that the email is already there. Hey, don't forget to have a good day. Kind regards, Anders. In this lesson, we will see how we can use data scraping in UiPath. Data scraping is just telling UiPath that this is structured data. Then UiPath will, if it is structured data indeed, extract the data to data tables. For example, we have this Amazon search here. We have items. We can see that we have one item here, one book here, and so on. This is structured data, so UiPath can extract these results. Let's see how that is done. So we go to UiPath. Then we click the data scraping wizard up here. We select the first element. Let's just say that we want to extract the title and the corresponding price. The first thing that we'll do is to get the title. So click next. We choose the title here. And then we want to choose the next title. So what we do now is telling UiPath that here we have a pattern. So click next and choose the next title. Now you can see that UiPath automatically find that pattern. We have one title here, here, here. It became yellow. So we can rename this column. Instead of just calling it column one, we can rename it to title. Then we can click next. And in our preview, we can see we have a title column with all the titles. We can now choose to extract correlated data. That is, for example, the price or whatever we wanted. So click the extract correlated data and choose the price. Make sure that you get the whole price with you, so like this. Then we will choose the second element, that's just the second price down here, like this. We can even rename this to price. Then we click next. Now we have our preview. We can see that our data is fine and smooth. We can see here that structured COBOL programming that misses the price, but that's probably because it misses the price here in the search. Yeah, here. So that one it will just skip. Then we can click finish, and UiPath will now ask us if this data is spanning multiple pages. This means that if we scroll down, we can see that we have a next button. So this data is indeed spanning multiple pages, 9 pages to be exact. And now we can choose if we want all 9 pages extracted. Let's not do that. So we click no, but you know that you have the possibility to click yes to get all the data. Let's just click no. This one will only get us the front page. If we, the important part here is that extract structured data here. And what we want to do here is that we can see that in the output, this one will extract to a data table, and here UiPath has predefined that name to be extract data table. So a data table is nothing more than an Excel clone just in the memory. So every time we close the robot stops, then this data table will disappear. So we need to have it written out, for example, to an Excel sheet. So let's do that. Let's go to write range and choose the one under workbook. This doesn't need an Excel application scope, so we'll drag this one in. The workbook path. Well, I created an empty sheet here called new Microsoft Excel worksheet. So shift right click, copy as path. We will hard code it in here for now, like this, because this is just a quick example. We'll write to sheet 1, that's fine. Let us just delete this range as we always do. And then click add headers. We want the price and the title headers. And then the data table, that's just the data table that we got from up here. So when you press Control space, you can find it here, extract data table. So this one will get the data and write it out to this sheet. And let's see if it works. It doesn't matter if we have it covered by this file explorer or you have scrolled down, UiPath will extract it anyway. You can see how fast it was. Then we can go to our folder and we can verify that we indeed got our extracted data in. That's it. We have our title and price, and you can see how easy that was. Let's just spice up the case a little. So let me close this one down and then open this Amazon sheet I got here. So our mission here, this one is not complicated, don't let that scare you, but I still recommend you to do the operations with me. So here I have an Excel table, it's just one column called search. We have 5 search strings: Python, Auto, Hotkey, C#, VB.NET and COBOL. We already did the COBOL. We want to do a search on each of these search strings, and then we want to have each result, like we had like from COBOL, we want to have written that out into a separate sheet in this book. So this one will combine some of our previously learned techniques, and this is a very good case. So make sure you do this with me. We will now close this Excel sheet. So what we do is that we start over, so let us delete all this. The first thing that we'll do is to read the Excel sheet. So we got it here called Amazon. What we'll do here is that we now use the Excel application scope, so search for that and drag it in. We will mark it here so it becomes blue, and we will untick the visible. We won't have this operations visible. The workbook path, we'll find it by going here, shift right click, copy as path. And now we want to use the best practice and create a variable here. So let's create a variable in the variables manager. We can call this str Excel path. And then we'll just paste in the value here in the default. Close down the variables manager, and we can now use the variable up here. So str Excel path. That's it. Then we will find a read range still from the Excel activities. So drag it in. We'll read sheet 1, that's fine. And then in the data table, the output, we'll create a data table where we will store our output. So Control K, and we can call this DT, and then we can just say Amazon. Like this. And this one is a data table with the Amazon searches on. So far so good. Now what we can do is that we can have a open browser, and then we can do the operations in there. So close this one down, find an open browser and drag it in. Now we need to ensure 2 things. First one is that we have the Chrome extension enabled. So go to Home, then we go to Tools and install the Chrome extension. That's easy. And make sure you restart your browser if you haven't done so. Then in the browser type up here, we'll click the Chrome, like this. So now we just need to navigate to our URL, and that is just the Amazon. So let's take the front page here, so amazon.com. Copy this and go back to UiPath. Again, we will create a variable because that is best practice. So in the variables, we will create a variable. Let's just call this strURL. Then let's paste it in here. You see that when we paste in the path, then it will automatically create the quotation marks. However, here it doesn't, so we need to create them ourselves. So let's just put in quotation marks and put in the Amazon address here. Let's close down the variables manager, and now we can use the newly created variable up here. So control space, and that is the strURL. So now we open up a browser. Then we will do a for each row. So for each of these searches in our Amazon sheet, we will do a search on Amazon. So let's find a for each row here, drag it in. So for each row in our DT Amazon up here, that is the DT Amazon, like this, then we want to do something. Let's delete this body because it will get complicated to look at. So what we'll do is that we want to navigate to the front page, because say that we are in our second row, then we have done a search and we want to make sure that it always looks like this, the front page. So we'll find a navigator, like here, drag it in. Where do we want to navigate to? That's just the strURL, that's the amazon.com. So this one will make sure that our instance will look the same for each of these rows that we want to do operations in. That's always a good practice to make sure that we always come in the same way. Now we want to do a search. So we want to find a type into here and drag it in. Make sure it's still in this for each row. So now we can indicate where we want to type something in. So click indicate, and that is up here in the search field. So this UI element. What do we want to type in? Well, we want to type in whatever in the search column of our Amazon data table here, the sheet here. So what we do here is that we'll say row, that's the current row, because we're in the for each row. Then we want to refer to the column, and the column was named search. We name that in our Excel sheet, so we say item, that's always column, parentheses, quotation marks, call it search, or refer to search. Then go outside the parentheses and say ToString, because it's an Excel object. Then we want to do the search, and we can do that by simply just clicking the plus sign here and click enter. This one will make the search. So now we have done the search, and we can say that, for example, we want to say vb.net, that was one of our search strings, and we can see the books here. Now we want to scrape the data here. So we just do exactly like we did before. Go back here. Then we click the data scraper. We select the elements, so click next. That's the title here, the first title. I'll do this rather quickly. This is the second title. Again, do these operations with me. Those ones are important. So call it title. Then we want to extract the price, the correlated data. Click here. Choose the, sorry, that was, I misclicked, so I only got the cents. And we can just click back. Here, we can click extract correlated data and take the price. Then we take the second element, so click next and choose the second price. We will call this price, and then we'll click next. Now we can see that we indeed have created the data scraping like we did before. It's exactly the same. We click finish, and then we click no again. Like this. Here it gets a little bit complicated, and because we're already in the browser instance, we can simply just take this extract structured data. You can see here the data table variable is up here. Then we can click Ctrl X for cut, and then we can delete this whole sequence. And the smart thing is that we just go down below here to type into and paste it in again. Now we will get an error because this variable doesn't exist, so let's create it. I will Ctrl A, delete this, and let's press Ctrl K to create a new data table variable. We'll just call it DT extract. You can call this whatever you want. I just like this notation, and that is something that is best practice too. So now we have scraped the data for each of the rows. Then we want to write it back to a separate Excel sheet. So let's find a right range here. And we choose the one in the Excel. So drag it in. Here, still in this for each row. So what we want to do is that we want to add headers for a start. Then we want to name the sheet. It is not supposed to be named sheet 1, but we need to have it named the current search term. And the current search term is just to be found up here. That's the row item search to string. So what we can do is that we can simply just copy this one. And then we'll paste it down below here. So this one will name our sheet from the current search. We can delete this range as we always do. And what do we want to write out? We want to write out the extracted data table from up here. That was the DT extract, like this. Now we can close our browser, and we can make sure that our workflow will work. UiPath will start in a few seconds. Then it will open up Amazon, and we will perform our searches. I'll just fast forward over this, as this is not really that interesting. That's it. That was our final search. We can go to our Excel sheet. This is the Amazon. And we can verify that we indeed have scraped all the data. So here we have the COBOL, we have the title price, we have the VB.net, we have the C#, Auto Hotkey, and Python. That's it. That's how you data scrape in UiPath. In this lesson, we will learn about screen scraping. We will use the most common screen scraping activity, and that is get text. Our mission today is that we have an Excel sheet with two columns, company and CEO, The company column that is already filled in with 5 company names: Microsoft, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. And we want to use a Google search, and then we want to use the get text to find the corresponding CEO. Let's see how that is done. First, we can go to Google, and then we can, for example, search for Microsoft CEO, like this. This one will get us the Microsoft CEO here, and what we want to get is this text using the screen scraping. And then again, if we will do this, we want to do the Apple CEO and get all 5 companies. So we can close down the Excel sheet. Then we can go to UiPath. And again, I will recommend you to do the operations with me, as you will learn a lot from that. If there's something that you will not understand, then just rewind the video and do it twice. So we want to use the get text. Let's see how that is working. So find a get text and drag it in. Then we can indicate what we want to get on the screen. So click here. And what we want to get here is the Tim Cook, right? That's the Apple CEO. So we want to get this. And then we can output it to a variable. That is a string variable up here. So you go up here, press Ctrl K, and we can just call this str CEO. You can call it whatever you want. And we can go down to variables, and we can see that we indeed had created a string variable down here. However, say that we will search for the Google CEO. You can see that this changes. Then we can go down to this get text, and this get text won't work, because if we click edit the selector, you can see that it is red. And what could be wrong? Well, we can see that when we created our selector, the Apple CEO is here. And then this number could be a problem. So we made a static selector, and we will now see how we can make a dynamic selector. Let me close this. Remember, this is the Apple selector, so we can open up a notepad. Something good to do. So this one was the Apple, and then we can choose to make we can indicate element here, and we can get the Google CEO selector. So click the Sundai Pichai, and this is our Google. Then we can go back to Notepad and paste it in below. You can clearly see it here. We have this Apple and Google, that's the static part. And then this number is the same here. However, it can be different. So what we want to do here, simply just to take the Google CEO and then replace it with an asterisk. And what we want to do here in the number here, we want to have an asterisk here as well. This selector will work, can validate it, and it will work for all our CEOs. So that's how you create a dynamic selector. That is a very important concept of UiPath. So now we get the text, we can make a right line to have our text written out. And in case you have forgot what you called your variable, you can just press Ctrl space. That is the str CEO. We can now run it to get our CEO, that is Sundai Pichai in this case. We can click the output, and we can see that it indeed is Sundai Pichai. We can verify that it is indeed dynamic by changing this to Facebook CEO, and then run the workflow again. Here, we go down to output, and that is Mark Zuckerberg. So now we have succeeded in creating a dynamic selector. We could create our entire workflow. Let us just delete these things here. And we can see here that we still, if we click variables, we still have the str CEO variable. We'll use that. So what we want to do now is that we want to read the Excel sheet. So find an Excel application scope, drag it in. The workbook path, well, I placed mine here. So shift right click, copy as path. And then we can either put it in here as a hard-coded value. However, it's always best practice to create a variable, because we can use this a lot of places in our workflow and this could change. So we will put it in down here. So we'll create a variable. We can call this str Excel path. And then we can just paste in the value here. Because now what we can do here is that we can put it in up here, str Excel path, and this variable that holds a value, so that will just be opening this particular one here. And if we change it, we can just change it down here in the variable manager. so we won't have to find it in a complicated workflow. This workflow will not be that complicated, but I just wanted to show you the best practice. Then the visible. Well, we will not have a visible setting because we will not see we don't wish to see the operations at least. Then we want to have the read range. Make sure it's from the Excel activities. There's 2, so drag in the read range. We want to read the sheet 1. If that's your sheet name, make sure it's the one. And then we want to output it to a data table. So go over here, Control K. We can call this DT CEO. Like this. And you can see it down here in the variables that we have created a data table called DT CEO. A data table, as we have previously mentioned, that is nothing more but just an Excel sheet in the memory. It will look like an exact copy of the Excel sheet, except that it will just disappear when the robot stops. But having it as a data table, it will enable us to quickly manipulate the data. So now we have gotten our read range, we have the data. Then we can open up a browser. And what you will need to do here is that we'll say open browser, drag it in here, and we want to use Chrome. So make sure you go to Home and then Tools and enable the Chrome extension here. So that's the one here, and we can go back. Again, up here in browser type, choose the Chrome. So the URL, well, that's just Google, but let's just copy it for all sakes. So copy the Google address. And then again, we'll create a variable instead of hard coding it in here. So this one is the str URL. And then we can paste it in over here. Now remember to put in quotation marks. We always need quotation marks with a string here, like this. Then we can just say str URL. So now we have opened up our browser. Then we can do a for each row on our data table. What a for each row does is just that it loops through each row of the data table. So find a for each row here, drag it in. We want to loop through each row of our newly created data table up here. So for each row in, then you can press Control Space and choose the DTCO, like this. And now we can start to do a Google search, and it's almost always best practice just to have a starting instance of Google. So whenever we start, we want to have the start page. And we'll get that by simply just having a navigate to, drag it in here. And now we can use our str URL. That is the URL variable because that was Google, remember? So we just navigate to Google. That's fine. Then we want to do a search, and we'll do that by having a type into here, drag it in. We will indicate where we want to type in, so click indicate, and you can now see that you can select the UI element here, that's the search field, like this. What do we want to type in? Well, we want to type in whatever in the current row of the data table. Remember our data table, let me open up the CEO Excel sheet again. Our data table will look like an exact copy of this. So, and it will loop through each of these rows, not the header. So when we're here, we want to type in Microsoft, that is from the company column. And then when we have got the Microsoft CEO, then we want to add it to here. So what we do to refer to where we want to type in, that was from the company column. So we say the current row, that's row. Then we want to get the column name, that is item, parentheses, quotation marks. Then we just say company. And because it's from Excel, it will be an object, so we'll say ToString, like this. So now we have our company typed in, and then we want to have a CEO. So we want to have the company and then CEO. What we do here is that we say plus, then we want to have quotation marks, a blank, and CEO. Then finally, at last, we want to do an enter, or we could use a click on the search here. Let's just pick an enter. So choose the plus sign here, let me repeat it, choose the plus sign here and click enter. So now we have made our Google search. Then we can have the get text. So let's find a get text, drag it in, indicate it. So, and now we just need to, before we indicate it, we need to do a search. So let's just pick the Google CEO. That doesn't matter what search you did, just do a CEO search. And now we can click indicate here. we want to output it to a variable. And remember, we have our str CEO here. So we will, in the output, we will just type in str CEO like this. So now we have gotten our text from up here. We just need to make this activity, this get text selector, dynamic. So click edit the selector. And what you can see here now is that we only have the this one to make dynamic. So what we do here is that we'll just make this number dynamic. Remember, it was 65 for, and now this will work. So that's it. Then we can minimize this. And what we need to do is that we got the text here. Now we just need to assign the value that we got to the CEO column of our data table. What we do here is that we will find an assign. So search for an assign and drag it in. How do we address the CEO column? We'll do that by simply just saying again row item. Item is the column, remember. Then CEO. This one will type something in the current row in the CEO column. What do we want to type in? Well, that was just the text that we got up from up here, str CEO. Now we have successfully created our loop. Then we can just write the data table back into Excel. That means updating it. Make sure you do it outside the for each row, but still in this do from the Excel application scope. We'll do it in the end, like here. We will find a right range, here. Choose the Excel one here, and then do it here. Where do we want to write to? We want to write and make sure it's outside the for each row. Let me double check it. It is. So where do we want to write? We want to write to the sheet 1. That's fine. I always just delete this range here. We want to add headers. And what data table do we want to write in? That is, of course, just our DTCO. So that's it. We can close down this Google and we can verify that we indeed had created a working workflow. So now I click run. We will open up Google Chrome in a few seconds. Here. Then we will start doing our searches. Microsoft CEO, that is Satya Nadella. Then we'll do our next search, Google CEO, and I won't have to repeat it, right? But you can see it will do all our 5 searches. Then we just need to verify after we have done the last one, that was Amazon. When we have done this and the workflow has stopped, it will do that in a few seconds like this. We just need to verify that we have indeed updated our CEO. Like here, you can see that we have updated the CEO column. That's how you work with screen scraping and get text. Now you can either click on the video on the left, that is UiPath Reframework. That will teach you all the best practices in enterprise UiPath development. Or you can click the playlist to the right, that is Advanced UiPath Use Cases.